Awesome. I think we are live now on social media. So what I'm going to do is just figure out where my Zoom panel is so that I can share my screen. There we go. So thank you for joining us on our session today. I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Rachel Stedman. And our plan today is to talk to you about building your financial foundation, specifically budgeting for independent contractors. We thought this was a really important topic because we know many of our independent contractors struggle with the fact that if you were an employee before, you're not used to the idea that you're not going to pay your taxes until the end of the year.
Yep.
And making sure that you've got enough money set aside. This sort of came out of, source deduction tax planning for T4s, which we've just been going through right now and realizing many people aren't prepared for the big lump sum check that they've got to write the government. So we figured this was a really important topic to talk to our customers about and make sure they understood the basics of budgeting and had some tools to help them prepare for the upcoming year. So I think it's going to be a really interesting topic. Again, as I said, my name is Andrew Wall, and I am the managing partner here at CPA for IT. And our mission is to help entrepreneurs organize their finances, create wealth, and transform wealth into a legacy. So today we're really focusing in on that organizing your finances and getting the roots and the foundation that is necessary in order to create wealth and transform that wealth into a legacy. So that's going to be our topic for today. If you do have questions throughout the webinar, those of you who are joining us live here on Zoom can ask your questions in the Q&A. We'll do our best to answer those as we go. And of course, if we miss them, we'll check them all at the end just to make sure we got them all. If you're joining us live on one of our social media channels, you can post a comment to whatever channel that you were in, and one of my colleagues will do their best to relay that up to us live so we can answer it in the webinar. And of course, if we miss that, we'll do our best to go back in and answer all those questions. So please do like, share, engage, comment. That really helps us to get this message out to more people. And, budgeting and financial literacy really is an important topic that, we can't discuss enough. So maybe we're going to start with some foundations on why you should build a budget. And Rachel, I know that you are very adamant about the need for a budget, and you actively do your own personal budgeting every single year. From an independent contractor standpoint, what are the risks that you see of not building a budget, and why is it so important, almost more important for an independent contractor than it is for, say, an employee who might be working at a large corporation?
For sure. So I'll answer the question, but in the reverse as to why so many independent contractors don't budget. And I think it's because, a lot of individuals that are in the independent contractor space come from, especially if they're new, they come from the prior employment industry where you're used to getting a T4, you're used to your employers paying you, they're withholding your CPP, your taxes. So, whatever money you have, that's your money. That's your play money. You spend it as it is, right? There's no tax implication because as an employee, you don't have to worry about what, your tax liabilities at the end of the year. And even if, let's say, somebody is an employee and they do have some taxes to pay come April, it's very minimal because your employer typically withholds quite sufficient based on what your income is. So, from that perspective, I think a lot of individuals that employ don't necessarily see a need to budget when we look at the importance that it plays to your tax liability. Whereas now, when you've transitioned from an employee to become an independent contractor, right? Of course, we see in the industry that there is always a bit of a gap, in terms of that additional revenue that they're making as an independent contractor versus an employee. All this money gets, put in your bank account, right? So if you start treating it like it was employment income and you're like, I have extra money and I'm just going to spend, what is so crucial to note is that now you are responsible for your tax liability. This is very crucial because what we see, with a lot of our clients, and again, more so those that are new into independent contracting, those that have been, in the industry for quite some time, they've maybe been bitten by this before, so they've learned a lesson, right? Some of them, however, it's such a bad lesson that they've, done year over year over year that it becomes, quite a bit of an issue. But essentially, you're required to pay your tax liability. That money that you're receiving, GST, HST on top of your income, which you need to be putting aside. That's not your money. That's not bonus money. Okay. And then on the other hand, you're also receiving all of this money that you need to factor. Oh, wait a minute, depending on how much I'm paying myself from the corporation, of course, depending on the strategy, if it's employment income or dividend income, you need to be putting that money aside. And it's like you said, time and time, we see situations where it's source deduction time frame and nobody's putting money aside. And not to mention as well, just in terms of, I think, the context of, maybe the generation that we're in or just everything, the average person is not really big on saving. And we all understand there's economic and all different kind of factors. So I think that's the other issue, right? So for a lot of people that are employed, maybe don't see the need to, but as an independent contractor, it is necessary because if not, the issues that you're having is that time to pay your taxes, you have no money you're paying into your GST, HST, you have no money for your source deduction, and then you're having late interest, late penalties, and all of these things. And then you start to, maybe I don't want to necessarily say regret, but not necessarily see the benefits of being self-employed because then you didn't really budget, right? And
Yeah.
plan how to be successful. And budgeting is really also a strategy to help you be successful on your independent contractor journey. That's just the points about it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. A budget is a plan, and failing to plan is planning to fail, right? So
Yeah.
I think that people need to look at a budget as just putting together a plan for the upcoming year. And I think,
Hmm.
given the economic times and how difficult things and, how much inflation has been going up and, the market has not been great for independent
Hmm.
contractors out there for new contracts. Now more than ever, putting together a plan to make sure that you've got money set aside to pay your taxes, as well as plan for retirement or whatever your future
Hmm.
goals or obligations, a child's wedding, whatever the case might be, putting
Hmm.
together the plan will help you to give you a better chance of achieving those goals. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things is when you are an independent contractor, it can get a little bit confusing between, well, what's business and what's
What's
personal.
personal? Hmm.
And that's exactly what we're going to talk a little bit about today. And we're going to give you some tools at the end of this session that you can use to put together a budget that will include both a personal budget to account for your personal spending, as well as a
Hmm.
business budget. And that personal budget effectively flows up into the business budget because
Hmm.
effectively, whatever you need for a personal budget is going to come out of your corporation for most individuals, and therefore is going to be an expense to the corporation. But also, we need to build that into the business budget to make sure that we've got enough set aside to account for the personal budget, so
Yeah.
that your business can support your lifestyle. And there are a ton of reasons that you want to do that. Ensuring, of course, ensuring that you've got the cash flow to cover these taxes, like we've talked about,
Hmm.
as well as minimizing your taxes, because again, the more that we can be strategic and forward thinking, the better organized we can be, and the more we can maximize deductions, and do planning with your accounting. Because all too often, as accountants, we are looking in the rear view mirror, and the
Yeah.
more that we can shift our mindset to looking forward and down the road a mile or two, the better we're going to be able to do as far as strategic planning for you, tax planning for you, and minimizing your overall taxes. So there's really, really a ton of features and benefits of why you should do it. We've talked about the full-time versus an independent contractor. Obviously, the importance of setting money aside. All this is just fluff, really. What we want to get
Yeah.
into is the meat and potatoes of what this is all about. So let me kill my PowerPoint here, and go down to a little PDF or a little Excel document that we put together. And there's a number of budgeting tools. I know towards the end, we're going to talk about some other more digital and more tech forward budgeting tools. But a budgeting tool, as I said, a budget is simply a plan.
Mhm.
And that plan can be done, old school pen and paper on the back of a napkin at the bar, which is better than nothing. And
Still
Excel,
something.
still something. An Excel spreadsheet like we put together here for you, or something more tech focused. And Rachel's got some recommendations, some tools she used, but we wanted to at least give everybody a free tool that they can use to start putting together a monthly budget. So what we've got here is put together um, a monthly budget. You've got an overview. It's got some nice graphics for you, including your top 5 highest operating expenses. And what we have is we've broken this down into operating expenses, which would be business expenses, and personal expenses. So the operating expenses, what we've done is we've put together a nice little plan here where it uses our benchmark analysis and the revenue that you will put in on the
Mhm.
income spreadsheet. So if I change this to 100,000 on our worksheet here, that should update our operating expenses, at least the estimates, right? Now you can go in and change these estimates because, as I said, the key with a budget is putting together a plan of what you think you're actually going to be spending on
Mhm.
these various expenses. And we've got it broken down by our chart of accounts. You can change these around as you see fit, but we figured we'd give you a starting point where at least you can get some numbers relatively quickly into the operating expense side. Unfortunately, on the personal expense side, we just have some generic numbers in here. You'll need to go a little bit more into depth into breaking down your individual costs. And this has been broken down nicely into the common areas. So we've got housing and entertainment, transportation and loans, insurance, and of course the all too important taxes, food and savings or investments. I think this is one of those things that often gets overlooked. But putting together a plan to put money aside for savings is an important part of that. You've got food, pets, gifts and donations, personal care, legal, and it'll put together a total projected cost for you. And what I should say is actually this says monthly budget. We should probably modify that to say yearly budget.
Yearly, yeah.
Yeah. Now, of course, this can be modified to be a monthly budget or
Mhm.
a yearly budget. In an ideal world, putting together a monthly budget is the best process if you're going to come back and review it on a regular basis and put in your actual expenses so that you can see, okay, here's my estimate, here's my actual, what's my variance, which will help you to adapt your plan for the coming months and to be prepared to make sure that you've got money set aside for those all too important tasks. Now, from my standpoint, putting together a monthly budget is really easy to say and a lot harder to do. And really, I think the best process that I can recommend to people is to just book it as part of your ongoing calendar. So once a month, maybe the
Yeah.
first of the month or the 15th of the month, put it into your calendar to go in and update your budget. Now, one of the other things that we are working on, it does not exist today because this, uh, you know, budgeting webinars came around relatively quickly, based out of our T4 season back in November. So we haven't had time to build this out yet. But what we are hoping to do for those of you who are using our updated new CRED manual, which we recently released, the plan is to integrate the budgeting tool with our CRED so that when you come back in to enter your business expenses for the year, it will then update this budget accordingly, which I think would hopefully inspire more people to be on track of using a budget and being prepared for the year.
Mhm.
And that's the vision. We bear with us. This spreadsheet as exists today will be available, and we'll send a copy out to all the registered attendees so that you have a copy of it as well. But of course, there are other tools out there. Rachel, maybe do you want to share some of the tools that you use? And because I know that
For sure.
you've got one that you use personally, that unfortunately I'm not as
Yes.
familiar with because it's been I used to use Mint, but Mint has been discontinued. And you went on a deep dive after Mint was
Yes.
discontinued. And you've
So
got
I will tell you for sure. I I'm an avid budgeter. Okay. I started using Mint before Mint goes in Canada. I had the Mint US app.
Yes.
Um, I literally had been using that app for maybe, I mean, just in general, I've been maybe budgeting for like the last 15, 20 years. It's something that has always been very important to me. I think, part of what initially started it, and I think that's the whole thing. When we look at budgeting, there has to be a reason why someone wants to budget. And for everybody, it's different. It's personal. Independent contractor, it's for your taxes, your this, cash flow. I think it was for me at the time. I wanted to purchase my home. So for me, I needed to know, okay, what am I spending my money on and putting a cap on it. Now, while there are spreadsheets available and even like what we're providing for individuals, which is great, right? It's very easy to put in the information. I also realized that I was a little lazy, okay, when it came to entering this information. And then I came across Mint. Unfortunately, I think this session is also a personal plea to Intuit to, bring back Mint. Unfortunately, last year they did discontinue Mint. So I went on a full deep dive in terms of utilizing other apps. So the purpose of using these apps, so what I currently use is actually called Monarch. Now, why I like these apps is because essentially you link your bank accounts to these tools, okay? And it imports. So anybody who's used QuickBooks Online or any of the other cloud-based bookkeeping tools, this is pretty much a cloud-based bookkeeping app. So you link all of your bank accounts into there and you create a budget for yourself. What is your income? What are your expenses? How much you want to spend on XYZ. And, I mean, I'm not much of a cash person. I mean, if you are cash, then you do have to manually enter it. Again,
Well,
I like the
cash is
fact
a
that
four-letter word for accountants. It's
I
more
know,
offensive
I
than
know,
anything
I
else.
know. I also hate it because I gotta manually write this, type this in, enter this information. So it links all of your bank account information and it provides so much clarity because I could set certain rules. So if there was a certain expense, I could, have it go to a certain category. So it made it very easy. And I kid you not, Andrew, I was literally on this app maybe 2 to 3 times in a week, just updating it, making sure everything is accurate. And even at the end of a year, I'll be honest, like I will look at all of my expenses and I will look, okay, how much did I spend on travel? What is my total Uber Eats for the entire year if it was too excessive, right? And, it also then allows you to have a savings component for you to also budget for savings and what your goal is, how much you want to put aside. And it will clearly tell you when you're over, when you're under on your expenses. And I found that once I started to really create a realistic budget for myself, because I think initially it changes over time just because you gotta, for now, everybody, you're just spending money, right? So you really want to put yourself on that, proper budget that you want to stick to. And it changes you so much financially. It makes you so much more financially responsible. At least it definitely did that for me. I think it was excellent. I could see what my net worth was, my assets versus my liabilities. Am I saving enough year over year? So that kind of financial transparency, it's like, honestly, Andrew, I could tell you down to the penny how much I spent in restaurants in like 2021, right? Versus, 2024. Like I was very, very specific. And it just really provided that clarity, that transparency. And then even for me, then I start looking at, okay, what about when I'm looking to retire? I'm still young, but I'm X amount of years ahead, how much money I want to be putting aside. So I think it is great. For me, I think it was, I preferred that option than utilizing an Excel. Now, the only thing when, individuals transitioned from Mint, which was honestly very, very sad, I keep talking about it, but you have Monarch. So I think after Mint, because Mint dominated the, cloud-based budgeting app. So there were so many companies that came out with so many different options, to try and compete or try and get the clientele. And Monarch, and trust me, I did a lot of research on this, was the closest there was to Mint in terms of the user friendliness of it. And it is great. Hands down, I do like it. I would, unfortunately, we don't have a demo. I think it'll be a little too personal, my information, so we don't have a demo. But it is great. However, there are some downsides. Okay. which is not the greatest downside. And I think a lot of these apps, one, you do have to pay a subscription for this account. Mint was free. I think for this one, it's about $49 for a year. So, I mean, it's not like it's cost prohibitive. But the other issue with these apps compared to, for example, Mint, is associated to linking your bank accounts. So, of course, a lot of the financial institutions, have, their security features in terms of being able to release your financial data. So you can't just link your bank account to any budgeting app, cloud-based bookkeeping app. And unfortunately, although Monarch, in my opinion, is the best, they have issues. The bank accounts, the feeds break quite often. So you almost every couple of weeks need to be linking your bank account. And then I was also doing some research recently. CIBC is one of the financial institutions that actually now started to disallow linking of the account. So which is a bit of an issue, of course, if you're trying to do a budget, you need to have all of your information. So that is becoming problematic. But for clients that also want to use a tool, don't necessarily want to use an Excel, or don't want to necessarily, use these apps, link their bank accounts, even with the different financial institutions, a lot of them have tracking apps and features within your financial institution, with your finance summaries. So it's very easy for you to get on board with doing your bookkeeping. So for example, I know a lot of the banks at the end summary of your credit card statements, it will tell you what was the total summary of all of your different expenses. I know TD, CIBC, RBC, they have these tracking apps within the online app, which again allows you to create a budget, and then it looks at what your day-to-day expenses are. However, of course, it doesn't link your other financial institutions, so you can only really do it within that one financial institution. So if there's a one financial institution that you primarily do your banking, that's great. But then if you have several, it might be a little difficult. However, what that can allow for you is that you can capitalize on these different tracking apps with your financial institution to get the summary of your expenses in each of them, and then you can enter it in the spreadsheet, right? So then it combines everything. So that is actually an option for you so that you can get all of your different financial information from your different banks into this one spreadsheet, and that can help you. But I think it's the best, and especially for the independent contractor, when you're saving, and it's like I say too, because I think we gauge at least 30%, Andrew. That's a good buffer of how much you want, what you're making, that you want to be saving to be comfortable in terms of your taxes. And then I tell clients, look, while you're saving that 30%, it doesn't have to just sit in a bank account doing nothing. Open a little, high interest savings account if you want to maybe do a little investment in the business. Just make sure you're not locking it in. Now, when it comes to taxes, it's locked in. You don't have access to it, right? But, save that, and I think once people start to do a budget of, what your personal expenses are, it also really does help then on the business side, because you also look at, okay, well, what are some of those personal expenses, which now can be deemed as a business expense, right? So then when we're looking at, cell phone, internet, etc., these things that we can, transition over, whenever I meet with clients during initial consultation, the first thing I always like to ask them, how much money do you think you need to live on a monthly basis, so we can determine, for tax planning? And a lot of it, trust me, they're just gauging numbers, but I don't really think they've actually thought of it and be like, okay, what do my expenses look like on a monthly basis? And again, in terms of that clarity, it helps to be able to determine what is business versus what is personal. And then you start to realize what you're thinking you need to take out that's potentially, going to be your taxable income might be actually a lot less, right? So this definitely does help, but I think it definitely starts on the personal side, understanding what your personal expenses are. So whether you choose to use an Excel or you're an app lover like me, I swear, I think that I should be, Monarch should be allowing us to give promos or something that we can offer a discount to a client. I mean, I think it's worth it. It really is worth it. There's always something out there. And as long as you try and you start somewhere, that's what's important.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And all too often, when you ask that question, well, how much do you need a month? You can see the people like, oh, I haven't even thought about that,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
usually I'm asking it from the question of financial freedom. Well, how much money do you need a month in to feel financially free? And a
Mm,
lot of people haven't thought about that, let alone done the work to go and actually figure out what it really is. And all too
hmm
often, when they're thinking about it in their heads, they're forgetting certain things or they're, inflating other numbers, and it's nowhere near accurate. Right.
hmm
And so putting together a good budget and plan will help you to stay on top of your finances now so that you've got your money set aside for your taxes.
hmm
It'll help you make sure that you've got money set aside for your savings, as well as make it easier for us to put together a personal net worth statement and plan for financial freedom. Because if we don't know how much money you need on a monthly basis to be
Yeah,
financially secure, how can you figure out when you're financially secure, when you're financially free?
for sure.
And
One other thing I want to add there, Andrew, that's also important. I think, and why saving is so, I think savings is so much more important for an independent contractor than it is for an employee. Because as an employee, okay, there's that regular income coming in. Let's say worst case scenario, something happens, you lose your job. You have EI, you can do these things. As an independent contractor, you don't have this. And part of the harsh realities about being an independent contractor is there comes a time, there's 3 months, there's 6 months, there's no money coming in. So you need to make sure that you're setting that money aside because you have no fallback. You are your own fallback, right? So I think it is more important for independent contractors to be saving than anything else and just really start somewhere, no matter how small it is, and then grow from there.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, we're sitting here going, why are we putting together a plan on budgeting as accountants? Is because we
Mhm.
see the impacts of people not having put together a budget or a plan.
Yeah.
Even if it's a simple back of the napkin, how much do I think I'm spending? And then doing your best to go in and cross check and compare
hmm
that to what did you actually spend, even if it's just once a year with your accountants that, okay, well, here's my business expenses and here's my director's advance, which your director's advance effectively is the sum of all your personal paid expenses, right?
hmm
Um, but if you can put together a plan, it will help you to curtail the spending on things that you might be spending a bunch of money on things that you don't truly value, right? You
Yeah.
might start realizing, hey, I'm spending $50,000 a year on Starbucks coffee. Maybe I should cut that back.
Oof. You should have shares in Starbucks for that kind of money you're spending.
Yeah, I'm exaggerating to make the point, right? But whatever the case might be, there might be overspending on
Mm,
things that you don't really appreciate the value for the amount of money that you spend. So
yeah,
maybe you
yeah.
can pivot and adapt. Maybe you realize, oh my God, I didn't realize my cell phone bill was actually this much. Maybe I should be
hmm
going back to my carrier and renegotiating. Or maybe
Yeah.
I can, combine lines and, bring in my cable and get a better deal. When you
mm,
have the data, you can make decisions. Without the data, it is very difficult to make decisions and put together an actual plan and a strategy,
yeah, yeah.
for yourself and ultimately for your business. So we hope that this tool that we will share with you, it's a basic Excel spreadsheet. We took it out of the Excel templates and modified it a little bit to add a little bit of zest by adding in the benchmark analysis and our chart of accounts.
Mm.
Monarch looks to be a great tool. Maybe not as good as Mint, apparently.
I
Uh,
know, I know. I am so sad. I am mourning Mint. Like I am mourning. It was great. And the thing about it, it was free. And because it was owned by Intuit, there was great security. So all the financial institutions were able to share the data. And honestly, I would have been willing to pay if it stayed. I would have paid $50 a month just to keep it. Like just the clarity. No, but Andrew, it really, and when I tell you, like, I know you talk about the coffee. The reality about it is that when people go buy a coffee and it's like a $5 here, $5 here, $5 here, $5, nobody really cares. It's $5. But when you look at it in a year, because I do remember one of the stark changes in terms of my spending was when I did realize how much money I was spending for coffee. And then I'm like, no, Andrew, I'm using the coffee machine in the office.
yeah.
Okay. Because, when you
For
look
what you
at
were
it,
spending, you can buy a fancy espresso machine.
the company was spending and buying the fancy for the employees. But essentially, it let me see, yeah, where I'm throwing my money away. I think that's what it is, right? When I look and I see how many hundreds of dollars I'm spending on that and hundreds of dollars on, my lunches here or there, and I'm like, that money could be saving. I could be having a good 3-4% interest on that and really setting myself up for success over coffee. So it really changed my spending habits drastically. I think, individuals that are starting the route of, creating a budget, again, as I said, what I would say, look at your prior data. Just look at it. Just look at what you spent before, right? And, be realistic. You will always tweak those, the expenses. Of course, there's inflation, different things happen. But I think initially it might just take a little time and energy. You really have to invest the time to be able to put this together and really work. And then once you get in the knack of it, it just becomes second nature for you to know, hey, what am I spending? What am I saving? How far am I off from my goals?
And then it almost becomes a little bit addictive, right?
Yeah, it was. For me, it was. From a
If you're
personal
if you're
speaker
checking
of
it every
it,
2 weeks, there's a little bit of an addiction, and that
Andrew,
dopamine
it was
hit when
almost
you're,
daily.
yeah, it becomes a dopamine hit, right? For the
Mm.
ADHD people out there like me, right? And you to go in and see the impact of putting together a plan and a budget and how that impacts how your spending will change, can be really rewarding in many ways. I
Oh
guess
yeah.
the big question I have for you is, what do you think are the biggest hurdles? Like, what prevented you from doing it before you had a budget? What were the hurdles?
Be quite frank, sheer laziness. I was like, I don't have time for this. Like, honestly, here's what it is. Here's what I think it is. At the end of the day, I thought I didn't need it. Because for me, I'm like, okay, there's money in my bank account. I'm paying my bills. Eh. I just did not see a need for it. I'm like, I'm just living my life, right? I think that's what it was. Yeah, because it didn't matter. Like, at least from a tax perspective, it didn't matter. It's not like as if, I was going to be owing money to CRA or anything along the lines of that. It just really did not matter. And yeah, I mean, even as a child, your parents talk about saving and budgeting, and I'm like, yeah, 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 yeah. And I just really didn't do it. Can I really identify the day and time again, as I said that I wanted to? No. But I do remember I had a purpose. I wanted to
Right.
buy a home. I wanted to have my deposit set aside. That was my purpose. And I will say, when you are achieving that goal, it feels so rewarding. When you're able to see how much you're saving. In fact, I love to see my savings in my account. It's great. No, but it's a sense of accomplishment, right? I
Yeah.
feel like I'm on the right track of where I want to go and what I want to do financially. And I also feel, because they always talk about you need to have what? Three to 4 months of salary or income on the side, in case of rainy days and different things, because these things do happen. And for the average person that, nothing has happened, you're very oblivious, but you also don't want to be putting yourself in a situation where you're in that financial strains. And again, especially when you're looking at the majority of that financial strains is to pay CRA. Okay,
Yeah.
that's an issue. And then sometimes do we also see clients, they're not filing their tax returns because they know they owe money and they're like, I don't want to know how much I owe. And then it's 1 year and 2 years and you haven't filed and you're owing, and then you're just exacerbating the problem, right? And again, going back to that is the downside of when people think, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be an employee, where you're not really setting yourself up for success to really reap all the benefits that
Mhm.
being self-employed provides for you, right? So it's like it's cutting yourself short, right? But yeah, I think it was just I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. And everybody has a reason why they don't do it, right? But the reason to get on it is to be successful, right?
Absolutely. And I think you're right. It's all too easy when there's enough money coming in to pay the
Yeah.
bills to not stress and not put together a plan. But then you're not setting money aside for savings. You're
Yeah.
not, and maybe you end up having enough money for the taxes at the end of the year, but you got to scrape it together from 5 different places because you hadn't planned for it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I'm hoping that, because it is really empowering when you take that control of your finances, and I'm hoping it'll help shift people's mindsets about their finances, and ultimately are also around their accounting and their taxes, because I know all too many of our clients dread dealing with us. It's almost worse than a dentist, because they know when we're done, we're probably going to tell them they owe the government quite a lot of
Yeah.
money, and it's a number that often they're not planned for or prepared for.
Hmm. Hmm.
We've always said to clients, set aside at least 30 cents on every dollar that you earn. but that's really high level, and everyone's situation is unique. That may or may not be enough. It might leave you
Mm-hmm.
with a bonus. It might be short, depending upon your
Mm-hmm.
individual situation. And the more that you
Mm-hmm.
can put together a budget and a plan, the more accurate you can get that number to be. And maybe you want it to be 35% so that you have enough to put aside into
Buffer.
TFSAs and
Mm-hmm.
all the other investment tools, which we'll be covering in 2 weeks. So come check out
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
webinar. And I know there haven't been a lot of questions about throughout this webinar, and I actually want to do something different. I want to actually post a question to our audience.
Oh, let's hear it.
And let's see if we can get you guys to actually use the chat. I know I said use the Q&A before, but I'd love to hear from the people who are attending us live in the Zoom. How many people here currently do a budget?
Yeah, that's
And
a good question.
I'd be curious to
Everybody, right?
Yeah.
Right?
I'm guessing probably not. And it's okay to say no. I mean, I'm expecting that most of you aren't putting together a budget, but I'd love to hear from you, whether you are or you aren't. If you can post in the chat whether
Yeah.
you're preparing a budget, that would be nice to know.
Yeah. Just to
And I know
know.
everyone's being quiet. Come
They're
on.
being quiet. I
Who's
know. I
going to
know.
be the first? Iman, you can post in here for us. We know, even if it's a no. Let's get
I'm
this
sure a
chat
lot
going.
of people are not budgeting. But
Okay.
here's the other thing too, Andrew, even from a budgeting standpoint, because again, and that's setting money aside, there are ways to be able to help. Well, because while we do understand that some people, creature of habit, you see money, you're spending the money. You can have a separate savings account and have the money transfer from your corporate account to your corporate savings. So you're putting that aside for your GST, HST, your taxes, etc. So that way it's already coming out. Okay. You can do that. Okay. Now, the more extreme for clients that really don't think that, they have the capacity to save and, put the money aside, you can also opt to having estimates and paying to CRA throughout the year. Don't necessarily advise that. Because then that's money that you're just sitting to CRA for no reason when you could have in a savings account and making a little bit of money. I wouldn't advise that. But for those that maybe need a little extreme, but at the bare minimum, even if it's set aside a different account, automatically have, transfers based on when you're getting paid from your savings to from the check-in to the savings account. That is actually a good way to kind of start.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some Q&As coming through.
Yeah, because I asked
Ooh.
everyone to post in the chat. The chat's disabled. So thank you for pointing that
Oh,
out, Mr. Anonymous attendee, that the chat is disabled. We have a couple other people saying, Iman did say, honestly, I'm not, although I should. We have Tara who's saying it's on my list to do for this year.
New Year's resolution, Tara.
Yeah, and hopefully, you'll now have a tool, at least do a basic one, whether you use Monarch or the Excel spreadsheet that we'll share with everyone. And again, if there's anything holding people back, if you have any questions about building a budget, please post those in the Q&A now, because I think, Rachel, I think we've covered everything that I can think of. I mean, there's not much more to share about a budget. I'm surprised that we spent as much time as we did, but I do think it's an important topic, and I hope that this will be the start to get people putting together a plan and a budget, because I truly believe it will be instrumental in helping you to keep to help you organize your finances, create wealth, and transform wealth into a legacy, which is our mission. And so it starts with the basics of putting together a budget. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A, because we know the chat's disabled. We'll give it another minute before we log off. But if not, as I said, we'll be sharing in the next day or two a link to the spreadsheet that we've downloaded. As well, reminder that in 2 weeks, we do have another session discussing where to invest. So hopefully you put together your budget, and you put together your plan, and you've got some savings, and you're trying to figure out where to put it. Well, we'll be covering that in 2 weeks in our session on where to invest. So go ahead and get registered for that. I know we've already got more than we normally have registered already. So it might sell out earlier than normal this year. So you might want to get on and get registered for that if you're not already. And Rachel, thank you for coming in and sharing your personal story.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Andrew. Have a good one. Cheers.
Okay. Bye for now, everybody. Okay.
think we're still
Yeah,
live.
we're still live. I can't get my thing to end it. There we are. Okay.